Hayley, thanks so much for making time to speak to me today. We are going to talk, of course, about the detail of the campaign and what we're looking to achieve and so on. But I'm really interested in your story. And I think we've been working in this space for a similar amount of time, 15 years or so. So what is it about PSHE, personal development, that has inspired your passion, your journey that you've been on since then?
So it's quite a long journey. It probably starts back from when I was a child, thinking about the things that would have helped me with some of the issues that I was facing growing up. But I think it really started when I was managing an alternative provision for secondary education. It was at the secondary education provision I realised that there was a lot of children out there that needed to be reached so much earlier. And I then got really passionate about going back to primary and supporting children to become more prepared for secondary, because this is where we see a lot of the issues starting to arise. And so at that point, probably back in 2011, I started to work with some of the best in the field to find out kind of what PSHE and personal development looked like and how could we bring it up to the 21st century. At the time, it was very disjointed. Some schools did it well, some didn't. Some did kind of ad hoc workshops, assemblies, and others would really integrate it into the curriculum. And I just felt that there was so much more that could be done, particularly in engaging visual and kinesthetic learners and bringing what they're used to kind of out of school, that visual interactive approach, into the classroom.
I mean, it's a dynamic sector we're in, Hayley, and a lot changes in a short period of time. 2009 really doesn't seem that long ago. But going back to your point on what schools were doing at that time, I mean, just how consistent was the practice? And I suppose not just what they were doing, but people's understanding of why we should be doing PSHE, why we should be looking at the personal development of the children. What was the landscape like at that time?
I feel that schools I was working with at the time, it came down to the moral compass of the head teacher as to how that was fed down to the staff across the school. And if the head teacher really believed in personal development, then it was done a lot better. But obviously teachers have different backgrounds. Many came from a very academic background and were very focused on the maths and English outcomes. So it did vary. I don't think there was ever a consistent approach. And often PSHE or personal development was the first thing to be left off the calendar when other things came into play, like SATs, for instance.
I guess this is one of the challenges. I'm conscious that both you and I have referred to PSHE and personal development, and then you've got RSE and British values and many other terms.
Protected characteristics, right? Safeguarding, connect to the world. It goes on and on, Phil, right? It must be really overwhelming for teachers.
It must be. So to that point, is that part of the issue here, that we are, I suppose, we're overworked with terminology and overworked with things that maybe we're trying to achieve around this? Is that part of the issue that we're all experiencing within schools?
I think so. I think when they made the decision to make part of PSHE statutory and bring out a whole new set of guidance, I think that's where the confusion come. And then, as you mentioned, their protected characteristics, British values, a connected world, all of these other areas that are now expected to cover. But actually, they all sit under the same umbrella of personal development, which happens to be the same area that they're inspected for. So I feel like that it needs to be more clarity for schools and in knowing exactly what we want children to learn by the end of primary, the end of secondary. And just to make it a bit clearer, there's too many grey areas, I think, for schools. Plus, as we'll probably get onto in a moment, there's no funding, there's no training in the handbook, and there's not enough support for schools to get it right, and certainly not enough time in the curriculum with all of the other pressures of all the other curriculum subjects.
Well, it's interesting, the context at the minute that we're in with Professor Becky Francis's curriculum and assessment review. Quite a tight time frame on that, I think, in terms of the consultation. But within all of this, I think Professor Francis has alluded to herself the need to look at PSHE and RSE and health education within all this. So is this kind of an opportunistic moment perhaps to revisit that curriculum aspect first and foremost, and I suppose the time and the focus within it?
I agree. I think the time has been here for a long time. I think going back to Janet Palmer's PSHE report back in 2013, it was very evident then that it wasn't being done well, and not a lot has changed since then. But I feel that there has been a shift, and I do believe that COVID may have added a bit of a silver lining to that in terms of opening up the conversations around mental well-being. And unfortunately, some people have had to suffer along the way. But if it helps us to achieve greater things for education, I think we'll all look back and think that was great that happened, because now we're looking forward and seeing much more opportunities to create better rounded children and to help them be more successful. Because we know that if children are happy and healthy and we focus on the whole child, then academic success will follow.
I'm going to come on to the detail of the Lessons for Life campaign in a moment, but it's always interesting for me as a country. We are quite good, I think, in the education world of looking to other countries, to look at the international pictures, maybe seeing what's working. There's always studies and so on of what's going on here. But I suppose my question is, in your experience, what have you spotted nationally and maybe heard or seen internationally that maybe we can learn from in terms of how personal development is best delivered within schools?
The one that sticks out in my mind is the Scandinavian model. I don't believe that they teach any academic subjects till the child is at least 7. So everything that's done before that is about that holistic development of the child. Now, although they don't have SATs as such, they do have testing at 15. And I believe the scores are much higher than the UK in terms of the last report I looked at. So I think that's proof in itself that maybe we need to focus more on personal development. And like we say, the academic success will follow.
Yeah. And the ethos of this campaign is about bridging that gap. Just looking at the website and the materials that are out there at the moment, the media coverage around the campaign, which we launched just before the end of the summer holidays. Just sort of talk to me about the objectives that you're looking to achieve with it, recognizing that with any campaign, you set your stall out on maybe several areas, but it evolves, of course, over time, and it becomes responsive to things going on. So, yeah, just the kind of ethos of the campaign and what you're looking to achieve with it.
So what I'm trying to do, I think we're a very reactive country, and so we've had to take this campaign in a different way that we first felt that we was going to, and that was to really look at the gaps at secondary to try and get more support for primary. Going back to my experience in secondary, I feel that there's a lot of schools that are firefighting and having to deal with issues that may have been under the surface for a long time. So what we're trying to do is actually highlight those gaps in order to encourage more support lower down in Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, so that we can better prepare children. And the way we're doing this is just by soft testing. It's not harsh exams, and just finding out a bit more about what children need as opposed to what we think they need. Because actually what they need and the things that are affecting them are not always what we believe. I remember, I'm going to be a bit personal now, but I remember being a child at school and didn't understand why I needed to learn Pythagoras' theorem, for example, because I was too worried about what was going on at home and violence and whatever the case was going on. It's not a sob story. I think it's a very common story. But we need to make sure that those children are happy before we can expect them to retain knowledge and to be successful within the school setting.
And children, it feels right now, are having information put at them from all angles. It's a very complex society that we're living in, and a dangerous one, of course, as well. So is the timing for this in part inspired by that bigger societal piece, the challenges around knife crime, obesity, and so on?
Definitely. I think I'll add to that with the social media. I think that's a huge, having a huge impact on children's well-being at the moment, and trying to live up to expectations of what they're seeing on social media. And there needs to be a lot more work done, I think, at primary before children even get those telephones. And we wouldn't give children a car without giving them lots of lessons first. And I feel that we need to have the same kind of approach to giving children a phone. And I can see why it's hard for parents particularly to say no to the phone when all of their child's friends around them have got phone, and there's a lot of pressure there on families as well. And then it's all the rest of the technology and the Google Doctor and all these other things that children can access now, and it's really hard to keep a track of what they are viewing, and we need to make sure that they can be skeptical about what they see and understand more about what they see online, and also try to not let them be influenced too much by what they see. It's never around when we were.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't, Hayley. And I see it as a parent. My son is 13 now. Got him his first phone 2 years ago. There's been a big change, and it is a challenge. Not just, I think, in terms of the time they spend on it, but yeah, those coping strategies, those mechanisms, and also from a parent perspective, I suppose, frankly, not understanding or being aware of exactly what they are looking at and when. So you're therefore relying, I think, on better education, aligned to some, strong parenting as well. So
you touched on a really important point there, that actually a lot of our children know how to use these devices more than the parents.
Yeah.
We need to be able to support the parents and carers too with that information on how to set the locks and the child safety features on the phones, because it's changing all the time. I don't think it's ever going to stop changing either, so that's hard.
Yeah, I mean, I was at a parents' evening last night, Hayley, and as always, I get the report scorecard in terms of reading, writing, maths. I hear about sort of the happiness levels in school. So my daughter's in year 4, but there was no discussion around personal development, PSHE per se. I had a look at a book, and it's very, very patchy in terms of the coverage. And I guess hearing you talk like that, and my experience, I'm thinking this must be pretty common, that you don't have the coverage and attention so much on life skills. And that's what it feels that it boils down to, those life skills, those coping skills, for not just what happens in school, but the whole world we're living in now.
Can I be frank?
Of course.
I think that's because many will agree that most of this work should be done in the home with the parents and the carers. But I think we've got to a point now where it's not consistently being done. And there's a lot of parents out there that need more support, that might be struggling with their own mental health. And I believe that we need to put about 10 or 20 years of support into the schools to create those strong, resilient parents in the future, to then be able to take that responsibility back off the school later on. But I think all that education and schools are our most powerful vehicle, the strongest vehicle we have at the moment to plug the gaps. And that if the government and Department of Education get behind that, we can really start to see an improvement, not just with our children, but actually our communities as well going forward.
Yeah, it's a great point. This isn't a quick fix, is it? It's something that needs to be set in stone, if you like, with the way the new government are approaching things in terms of that 10-year vision of working and talking to the sector about how to get to these places. So that all chimes with that. Just going back to the why, and you spoke about the assessment, right? So there isn't an assessment right now, is there? Or certainly not a statutory one where you can really, really understand where children are at in their personal development. So you're tackling that. You've got a transition quiz. What does that look like? And what's the kind of difference I think you're looking to make with that?
Okay, so the way I see it is, children are like seeds, and they all kind of have the same environment in terms of the soil, but sometimes children will have different nutrients and may thrive better or worse in particular environments. And I see education as those extra nutrients that we can give children to give them all the same fighting chance. In terms of personal development, they all have different. They all have kind of different input from home, community, friendship groups, what they're seeing on social media. And so we've created a pilot to be able to gather some kind of general knowledge to see where children have the gaps, because it may look very different from one child to another. So the pilot is 2 short quizzes. It's very fun for the children. It has pictures, dictation, and they can go on as individuals and answer multi-choice questions. And then that information goes back to a teacher dashboard. The results can be filtered by individual or vulnerable groups such as pupil premium, SEN, EAL, so children that speak English as an additional language. And then the teachers will be able to observe where the gaps are. Now, they might be able to see that there is a particular PSHE topic that hasn't covered well, and they could then reframe their teaching around the results. Or they can actually create small group work. Let's say there's maybe 10 children that don't understand as much as they would like around managing feelings and emotions. They could do some more nurture work with a particular small group. And everything is at the moment focused on preparing them for that transition to secondary, where I feel it's a big leap for some children, but actually in the future we'd like to see that done over a longer period of time, and especially at year 10 for myself, I would really like to see how we plug in the gaps before children kind of venture into adult life.
You've alluded to the challenges at secondary. What are the sorts of things you've seen or experienced that are specific to that age group, going into year 7 and ultimately 10?
I've seen some horrendous things in secondary, just where children don't have the knowledge. I've seen 13 and 14-year-olds being put on the sex offenders register because they've shared pictures. But yet when you trace back, where were they given the knowledge to know that was wrong? We know, yes, that children should generally know that that's wrong, but where was the opportunity to really drill that information in before they ended up with a criminal record? When I used to run my alternative provision, one of the things I was quite surprised about is we used to teach about joint enterprise. Now, at that time, back in 2009, 2010, I think there was over 3,000 children under the age of 16 that were in youth offending institutes for joint enterprise. And if you understand joint enterprise, I could give you a baseball bat, Phil, and you could go out and use that and hurt someone, then I would be in as much trouble as you. But I never came across one child, or in fact, I never came across a teacher with the schools that we were working with that understood the concept of joint enterprise. So if children don't understand that concept, how do we expect them to make better decisions? I mean, many children don't even know they become criminally responsible at the age of 10. So I feel that it's a bit of a disservice not giving them that information and expecting children to know all of this. And if they don't know, then education is the answer.
Where you're at right now, what are the things that you're hoping this quiz will shed light on that we don't already know or can't get from elsewhere?
I think it's not just about looking at the gaps. I think we also need to support teachers in knowing where they're doing it well, and where they are exceeding expectations. A lot of the time I feel that teachers can't assess enough within PSHE, and that's something we've been working on for some time now, short-term, long-term assessments. And now this kind of hard data at the top, I really feel will be the cherry on the cake. We want all teachers to be able to be in that year 6 leavers assembly, looking at all their children, not feeling concerned that some are not ready, that actually, even if they do struggle, they've actually got those skills in the toolkit to be able to ask for help or to know what to do when things get tough, and to try and build that resilience, because that's all we can want for children. We can't answer everything for them or make their choices for them, but by giving them the skills to be able to make sure if things do get tough, they know what to do. I think that's the best thing that we can offer.
Yeah, it makes sense. I was reading your article in Schools Week over the summer. Great article, great sort of opening to the why, if you like, we're doing this. But you talked about a potential need to rebalance curriculum priorities within primary, and we all know there's so much to pack into the primary curriculum already. And if you're going to add something, you've got to take something out. It's the $1 million question. But do you have a view, if more time and effort was put into personal development, what might go?
I might be hated for my next comment, but I'm gonna talk from the heart. So, as it stands at the moment, most primary schools spend a maximum of about an hour on PSHE a week. That's general. There are some schools that are doing it a lot more, but generally 45 minutes to an hour. Looking at a child's year, that equates to 0.46% of their year. So that's less than 0.5% of their time working on their personal development. Now, I know that schools do a lot outside of the curriculum supporting children, but for those children that are not getting enough support at home or are being influenced incorrectly in the community, I feel that there needs to be more. Now, I get asked the question quite a lot, what would I take out of the curriculum? And the historians are not going to like me, but for me, where we are currently right now, I would say removing history and pushing that up to secondary, because as much as this is really important subjects, we need to work on children where they are now, making sure that they can cope in today's society before we worry about what happened in the Roman times, for instance. It needs to be more current. So that would be My suggestion.
It's one suggestion, isn't it?
Historians are not going to like me for that comment.
Of course they're not. But if you don't pin down something to history, you can go to geography, you can go into languages. It's a no-win situation. It's more of a sign of where the primary curriculum is at.
Cross-curricular is another opportunity using history subjects or geography subjects to look at how we can cross that over with personal development as well.
Yeah. So there's something here, just from what we've said so far, in terms of curriculum coverage, in terms of assessment, if you want to use that word, but certainly that understanding as to where children are at and perhaps where they need to get to, particularly in that transition piece. But, ultimately there are teachers at the heart of this, and they need support. And obviously through the work that you do with One Decision, you equip hundreds of schools and teachers with some excellent resources. Now, is there something here, not just in terms of those resources, but actually looking at it more holistically in terms of maybe where trainee teachers need to be? So having that training and development in those early years, and then obviously building, and then you get that consistency of what effective personal development education looks like. Do you see an opportunity there?
100%. I think it needs to be featuring in the framework for the early teaching framework, for sure. There is nothing in there at the moment. And I think we're missing a trick, because ultimately we want children to be able to survive beyond the academic subjects. We can teach children maths and English till the cows come home, but if they're not employable, it's absolutely pointless. And I've seen many children struggling, even though they've received all of the marks that they required in GCSE level, but they've really struggled personally to move forward beyond their school years. So I think there's lots of opportunities. But if there's no training for the early teachers and there's no funding, I mean, another thing that I see is within the school environment, particularly at primary, everything is so crammed in, so that when we do bring in PSHE and we have a PSHE lead, it's often the PSHE lead that received the training and is expected to cascade all of that information down to sometimes 12, 14 teachers across the school that are also delivering the subject. And there is a bit of an inconsistency there, and sometimes a lack of confidence with some teachers. We need to be teaching or supporting all teachers that are delivering personal development related content.
Yeah. You mentioned funding. Obviously, since the new government came, it's pretty clear there's not the money there. There will be challenging budget reviews and spending reviews and so on. But I guess, playing devil's advocate, if it's important enough, the money will surely be found. However, realistically, you're then looking at, if you invest more in this, what does it lead to? And just a quick look at the Lessons for Life campaign website coming into the studio today tells me that with examples such as obesity, just to return to that, the spend on that, if it was prevented or more preventable.
Do you know the spend, Phil?
I can't tell you the spend, Aid, off the top of my head.
Would you like me to tell you the spend?
Go on, if you know it.
Okay, so in terms of diabetes treatment,
right,
our country's spending £14 billion.
The preventable type?
No, so 90% of that is type 2,
okay,
which is the preventable type. So it equates to £12.6 billion a year. Now, if that money alone that was at top end was shared amongst the primary schools, each primary school in the UK would get £681,000. And the campaign is asking for a much smaller figure of between 5 and 10, depending on the size of the school, £5,000 to £10,000, to be able to give teachers money for training, money for resources, money for workshops, whether they be proactive or reactive. If something happens in the community, they'll be able to reach out to those fantastic organisations that can support them in reaching their objectives. Something similar to the Sports Premium Fund is the kind of thing we're looking at, which was introduced back in 2013. I know that there's been a bit of controversy over the results of that spend, and there's been some questions on the type of things that schools have been kind of forced to spend it on, and that's a lot of teacher support and what they need within the classroom at that time. But if schools had a ring-fenced money, they would be able to achieve much more. Now, there is another campaign that's running alongside which is asking the government to actually put a higher tax on high salt, high fat and high sugar foods. We know we've got one for the drinks. And that ask, and also a tax on the digital companies, such as the social media. I think there's only 2%. I may need to correct myself on that, but it's a very low tax on social media. And these big companies have got the option to actually provide more money that can help us to help children in this country. And if that was successful, that campaign, that won't only support the aims that we're trying to achieve, but could also support free school meals, breakfast clubs, and so much more that children need that they're saying that there's not enough money for.
Yeah, I think what you've alluded to there, Hayley, is just the need to kind of join things up when you're speaking about those campaigns. And, not everything can be in terms of personal development, PSHE. That's on schools, that's on parents. If we can bring things together, surely it makes the boat go faster. And just on that, I know this campaign isn't about you. Obviously, it's your brainchild, if you like. Your passion, 20 years, and you can feel that just coming through constantly from talking to you. It's wonderful. But what else is going on in terms of partners, supporters, how they're getting involved in the work?
We're building partners and supporters every day, which has been fantastic because this is certainly not a one-person journey. We need to keep adding those voices. So there's a number of people that have been involved, such as School TV. Janet Palmer, I mentioned earlier about her report that she did back in 2013. She has now retired, but is very keen to come back, hopefully to Westminster with us, to talk about how not much has changed since she was asked to do that report back then. So there's a number of different organisations that are Head Teacher Chat. I could probably go on for a while, and they're all on the website. And we're also putting together a white paper, not only with the data that we're collecting from the personal development quiz. School TV are collecting data from parents and carers. Parent Kind have got some fantastic data which they'd like to include. A number of different counties have got local data that they would like to put into the white paper. Teacher Tap have gathered the voices of Key Stage 3 teachers to talk about their feelings on children's preparedness for secondary school. And we really look forward to gathering that and putting all of that together. And we're going to be presenting that white paper at number 10 at some point towards Christmas, in the hope that we can gather even more support from more MPs. And our biggest aim is to have our event in Westminster and to be really heard by the spring.
So literally wasting no time with this, Hayley. And I suppose what you haven't mentioned is there's a petition as well.
Yes.
So what's the fundamental ask there with these things? And I guess the ask is of schools or anybody watching, listening to this podcast to consider putting their name to it.
Definitely. So within the campaign itself, we've got a lot of partners and supporters that are similar companies to mine that are out there doing that work on the front line, supporting schools, creating resources to enable schools to deliver personal development at their best. The petition had been created to bring in the teacher voice and just the general public, really, to say, well, actually, we all agree that there is room for more lessons for life for all of our children, to make all of our communities, all of our families, all of our connections, relationships much more healthy and happier just across the country.
The ask is this is bigger than education. It's parents, it's the average Joe. This matters to us all, doesn't it? And maybe that's the message that isn't getting heard so much now. Again, go back to the thing about putting PSHE in a box. There's your hour. It can't be like that anymore.
What I would say is, if you're sick of picking up a newspaper or listening to the TV or the radio as to what's going on, knife crime, poor mental health, violence, rape, murder, then I think you're going to want to back this campaign, because I think everybody can agree that we could have safer streets, we can have better prepared children going into adulthood. The list goes on and on. So we urge everyone to kind of get behind us and to do this as a collective. This is just not a small group of people shouting. I think this is something. I'll be very surprised to come across one person that wouldn't like to see this country thrive. in all directions, and it has to start with education. If we can't reach the adults, then we need to start on the new adults that are coming in the next generation.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And just reflected on my own community, I see and I hear everything that you're saying. It comes back to what you experience on a day to day, how you feel about it, the children, and so on. And you're right. I suppose you're always looking back that tipping point. Like, when did it get like it is now? It's a difficult question, but was there one thing or one episode that maybe just tipped it over the edge?
I think there's a collective of things. I do think there has been some power taken away from the schools and the police force. Some may not agree with that. But that's my own personal opinion. That I think there just needs to be more support for those families that are struggling. But again, there's not families, there's not family support like it used to be. We don't have those centres, we don't have as many community centres. And I'm not saying that's an excuse for why children are doing what they do on the street, and there's a lot of boredom. I think that there's a lot of children missing from education, and I think that's been born out of COVID. That's a negative. We've had a lot of parents being told your children can't go to school, and now we're at a point where, well, actually they're choosing not to put their children in school, or it's not the right environment for their children. There's not enough support for SEN children, so there's a lot of children being kept away from environment where the parents don't think it's right. I think it's a whole collective, and then got a lot of parents and carers out there that are struggling with their own mental health, whether that's come from COVID or way back before that. I don't think we can pinpoint, but I think there's a lot of reasons.
Yeah, and it feels like a collective responsibility to try and move it on. Okay, it doesn't happen overnight, but in the next 5-10 years, we can maybe move forward with some of this. And I suppose one of the things that's really struck me in terms of what you said is just that power of education.
Yeah.
That's not to put the sole responsibility on education, because it's bigger than that. You've just outlined that. But actually, we do need to try and make a change there. And, new government coming in, yes, again, they've been clear on kind of what needs to happen in terms of the financial situation in this country. But I suppose as we sit here right now, knowing what we know, if there's one thing that government can do to better support schools to deliver this personal development education, what is the one thing that they could do tomorrow or next week?
If the money does come available, I just think of ring-fence money that can be used for training resources for personal development. It's such a vast subject area that schools are struggling to get what they need. And those schools that don't have money, the pressures on the teachers to create the resources is probably outweighs the money that they could spend on getting that support in as well. I mean, I'm not to say that that's not valuable what they're doing, but there's a lot of time and things are changing rapidly all the time. We need new resources all the time because there's new threats that are coming up for children. Money would be great, but it doesn't come down to money. There needs to be a slight relax somewhere in the curriculum to allow schools to do this. They're being inspected for it, but they're not getting the support as much as I feel that they should be getting, for sure.
So I guess, given this curriculum and assessment review, you'd welcome the opportunity to maybe talk to the guys there, Professor Becky Francis and the wider team about this, and maybe try and contribute some of this to them.
Definitely. I've got a whole group of us that would be really, really interested in sharing our views, and we'll be doing that on the national survey as well. Yeah. If there's any other opportunities that come up to share more about the work that we're doing, would be fantastic.
Yeah, okay. Just thinking back to schools who are tackling this now, I obviously got lots of experience in working with primary schools in particular around this. But what's your kind of, if you're asked, for somebody who doesn't know about you and wanted to know about more, what would be your starting point, your general advice to a school to get that personal development journey back up and running if it's not already?
One of the big keys in personal development is the assessment. We've got all these boxes to tick, but we don't necessarily always know what the children need. I can't tell you the amount of times I've gone into schools on Anti-Bullying Week and seen another poster being created, but we're not actually getting down to the fundamentals of what children understand as such when it comes to, again, I'm not saying that there's not a lot of schools that are doing this fantastically, But the assessment gives us an opportunity to explore more, to really hone in on those topics that are affecting children right now. And that changes from school to school, community to community, from county to county, and it changes again potentially a month down the line. So it's just having those open discussions and asking children what's worrying them. Because if it's worrying them, it's going to affect outcomes, because it will affect their learning in general if they're struggling with other areas of personal development.
And that's what it's all about, isn't it? At the end of the day, it's the children who we're all here to support and be the best that they can be. So I suppose my question, or one of my closing questions really, is around, it goes a little bit back to the why rather than the how so much, but the why we should be doing this. So what you've, I suppose, seen during your 15 or so years looking at this this agenda, the impact on schools, of course, for the actual school, whether that's in Ofsted terms or anything else. But yeah, your experiences of the effect of effective PSHE, personal development, on children, groups of children as interventions. What are the sorts of things you kind of see, and I suppose you're most proud of in terms of what's happened as a result?
Something I love so much is watching children teach other children what they've learned and showing that deeper level of knowledge. We've been into schools where we use that kind of peer mentoring opportunity where children will maybe have learned about road safety, and then they'll deliver a session to the younger children, and it's just amazing to watch them not only learn but become teachers. And that's what we want. We want them to leave school and become the teachers for their own children. And all we can do is just keep giving them that knowledge to just be wiser and to be safer and to be healthier and to manage those relationships. I haven't yet come across an adult that's ever said to me, "No, there's nothing I wish I had learnt." Everybody has something that they wish they would have learned before they become an adult. And education has the opportunity to fill those gaps.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of those gaps, here's one for you. You'll like this. Crystal ball out on the table. If we're having this conversation in 10 years' time, where you and me are going to be closer to 60 than 50. Imagine that. Still with this lovely brick wall behind us. What does success look like, I suppose, from this? That old question. We with the campaigns there, the asks are clear, the ambition is abundantly clear and the passion behind it. But yeah, what does success look like? What needs to really, really change over the next decade?
It's confidence. It's teacher-parent confidence that we can't necessarily force children to use the knowledge. But if we do our job correctly and know that they have the knowledge, then we give them a fighting chance of making the right choices as they grow. So it's just that confidence. I spoke earlier about children leaving primary and having that confidence they're ready for that next step. And then the next step would be that they're ready to leave secondary or college or university with that knowledge, with that toolkit. And we as adults can sit back and feel reassured that we've done as much as we can to prepare them and to feel less worried about children's futures.
Yeah. Hey, look, it's been great talking to you today. I've really, really enjoyed it. It's a serious issue, of course, but you've made it really, really engaging throughout. I suppose just my final one is for anybody listening or watching, is there anything else you can say to them in terms of how to get in touch with you or how to support the campaign that we hadn't covered off?
Of course. So the petition is one, and I'm sure the link will feature somewhere around this video. So anyone that would like to support, even just by signing the petition, would be gratefully received. Secondary schools can get involved with using the personal development quiz for year 7, which provides them with fantastic data for their new cohort and can help steer PSHE lessons. And also their anonymised data will help us show where those gaps may be so that we can try and get more support for primary schools within this current campaign.
Yeah. Hayley, thank you.